Hello again, and welcome back to this series on the USA in the 1920s. This time we will be focusing on the Wall Street crash, which occurred on the 29th of October 1929 in the USA, and the impact that this had worldwide. On the last days of October 1929, the confidence that had driven the US economic boom took a sudden turn, as speculators began to rapidly sell their shares due to the falling prices of the stock market. This meant that the prices of shares fell further, causing an endless loss of money within the stock market, until finally $30 billion had been lost out of a total of $100 billion. But why did the economy crash so suddenly, and why could it not easily recover as it had done before? To begin with, the first reason for the crash of the stock market was because of overproduction that had been continuing throughout the 1920s. With an uneven distribution of wealth across the USA, seen in the rural poverty compared to the thriving cities that are usually associated with the Roaring Twenties, markets for the goods that were being produced began to dwindle. Once wealthy families had already bought one of the newly mass-produced items, they did not need another, and there was no new market to sell to as a result. The rich no longer needed these items, and the poor could not afford them. This therefore led to widespread overproduction by consumer industries, who continued to produce in order to meet the previous demands, meaning that goods could no longer be sold. As there became a surplus of goods, the industries had to lower their prices to make their items more appealing, which in turn led to a fall in prices throughout the whole economy as a result. One other reason for the crash of the stock market was because of the instability of get-rich-quick schemes. The prosperity that had been created within the American economy throughout the 1920s had been driven by a confidence that anyone could be rich, causing many to invest in the stock market as a result. However, without proper government intervention within these schemes, ordinary and amateur speculators began to become involved, buying huge amounts which they inevitably lost within the crash. The practices of market manipulation by big businesses, where the rich could invest a lot of money and so other people would too in order to increase their profits, along with insider dealing, where the industries would use their knowledge of the market to their advantage, meant that the stock market was incredibly susceptible to corruption. This therefore inevitably led to its downfall in 1929. One other reason for the crash of the stock market was because of the inability of these industries to sell their goods abroad. Due to the Fordney-McCumber tariffs of 1922, which went against the government's laissez-faire policies of non-intervention, industries were unable to export their goods abroad, as other countries also increased their tariffs in response to the American initiatives. This therefore meant that the US industries were unable to export their goods when the domestic industry had been exhausted, further increasing overproduction and causing falling prices as a result. The banks were also a cause of the Wall Street crash, as their decision not to intervene to help the falling prices meant that prices fell even more within the stock market. The instability of the system, which had been outdated following the industrialization of the 1920s, meant that there were over 30,000 banks in the USA who could not cope with the financial problems of the crash. In addition, many banks took advantage of the confidence of the boom, favoring low interest rates to stimulate further investment. This was disastrous after the Wall Street crash, as people could not pay back their loans, therefore went bankrupt, and many lost all of their savings as a result. The effects of the Wall Street crash were profound and were felt all over the globe. This can be seen in the individual cases such as the Vanderbilt family, who lost $40 million. Rockefeller also lost 80% of his wealth, and Winston Churchill lost £500,000. Bank failure was widespread across the USA, as 4,300 banks failed as a result. This meant that the banks were unable to invest in industries, causing industries to go bankrupt. They could therefore no longer employ workers, which decreased wages, causing individuals to have less disposable income and so could not afford to buy the products of the industries, causing the spiral of economic depression. Wages were seen to decrease by 60% as a result, which had huge impacts on the whole of the American economy. Thank you for watching this series on the USA in the 1920s. I really hope that you've been able to take away some understanding from these videos when usual learning has been compromised. Please comment any questions that you might have. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'd love to know if there are any periods of history that you would like me to cover next.